Hello, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the whole MCTAC team, I would like to thank you for tuning in for today's session. Today, we are going to be going over Module 5 of our Data Beyond the Tip of the Iceberg series. And the title of today's module is The Data Matrix Agency Data. And today's presentation is going to be done by MCTAC consultant Chris Copeland. So for today's session, we did over our welcome and introductions. And then really today is going to focus on the data matrix, really talking about the data at the agency level across these different domains in the matrix. So we'll talk about finance, human resources and staffing, quality and compliance, population served, outcomes, and then we'll wrap up and talk a little bit about our next modules.
So thank you, Ashley, for that introduction. So what we'll be talking about today is the data that really tells an agency where we are. It's data for the leadership of the agency, for the board, and data that is often shared with external stakeholders. I mean, this data is based on metrics that the agency has to decide is crucial to know where you are and how effective you are. And it's really important to balance the fiscal data, which is often the data that's most available, with the program effectiveness data to achieve a more balanced approach to data within the agency and the ability to manage the agency across all the programs. So the data that we're going to be looking at today is the overall data, and then as we look down through the different levels within the matrix, you'll be seeing program data, supervisory data, and staff data that rolls up to this data, and it really is a way of connecting the data and the work that everybody does within the agency to the mission statement. So the individual staff reporting their data, or data that connects to the supervisory, to the program level, and then to the agency and the mission level. And as we look at this, the matrix, we'll be seeing that on the left-hand side of the matrix, which is where the financial area is, it's really the data that's more available. And as we move to the right-hand side through population, outcomes, and to outcomes, you'll find that the data is probably less available, but becomes more and more unique to the individual agency. There's an overall story to this, and based around these three rights. We're always looking at the right data to the right person at the right time. And just to explain that a little bit, the right data has to be very specific to their role. It needs to be understandable to that person, and it needs to be data that they can take action on. And it needs to be, the right person needs to get that right data. There's no point in giving a program director overall agency data, because that doesn't help them run the program. And the data needs to come at a time and frequency that's appropriate for that, to be used. It needs to be, if the data needs to be fresh, it needs to be available all the time, and it needs to be available on a regular frequency that makes sense of the data you're looking at. So financial data needs to be at least monthly, and maybe some other outcome data could be on a different time frame. But always understanding that the right data getting to the right person at the right time is crucial for managing this. So let's have a look at the top left-hand corner of the matrix, which is where we're looking at the finance data at an agency level. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see a list of suggested, and in some cases, absolutely crucial data sets that leadership of an agency is going to be looking at. And again, this is data that should really comprise either a formal dashboard or at least data that's available on a regular basis that the executive leadership should be looking at. This could be weekly, monthly, quarterly, depending on the critical nature of the data. And this data really is should demonstrate the key metrics that the agency's decided it needs to monitor for its financial health. And the real question that you should be asking yourself is, do you know what these metrics are? For every agency, cash on hand, profit and loss statements, the balance sheet, but there are going to be other metrics that you need to understand, and that may be collection rates by program, census, productivity for clinics, whatever the financial health of the agency depend on, should be available to the executive team to review on a regular basis. And not only is it available, but it's in a form that you can actually make decisions and take action on. It's the data that is available, could be available, needs not to be overwhelming. It needs to be clear and precise, and in a way that people can review and make decisions on. So similarly, human resources and staff, and really what we're looking at here is the quality of staff available to run the agency. And on the left, again, I think we have some fairly familiar terms. And the question again is, are you tracking them? Agency turnover, not just across the agency, but by position, by program, and by length of service. There's a lot to be learned by understanding not only what happens at an agency level, but looking at recruitment needs based on individual programs. I think I'll be talking a little bit more on the next module about what to look at in terms of a program level. But really understanding agency turnover, it helps in terms of targeted approach to recruitment and retention. Knowing where you are in terms of salaries against market helps understand some of the staffing issues you may have, and where you stand against the competition. And vacancies by program and the time to fill vacancies are all crucial data elements in terms of understanding not only just the recruitment efforts, but also understanding why some programs may or may not be able to meet their financial or contractual obligations. So this data is not necessarily data that's just kept in the human resources domain, but needs to be shared across those domains and down through the agency, as we'll talk more about in further modules. Staff satisfaction, a robust feedback from staff can give you valuable insight. It's not enough these days, I don't think, to assume that no news is good news. Staff satisfaction needs to be clear and honest, and it needs to be done in a way that if people make comments, that they're seen, that leadership looks at and takes action against it. And lastly, staff demographics. I think it's increasingly important that understanding who the staff are, not only in terms of the agency, but in terms of the people you're serving and the communities you work in. Understanding those demographics at an agency level really is the only empirical way you know whether you're hiring appropriately, whether your hiring is skewed against or for certain populations and groups is really important. And it's clear and obvious, I think, that people who use services need to understand that the people who provide services represent them and their communities. So understanding staff demographics, not only from a legal point of view, but from a good stewardship of the agency, is really important. Quality compliance. So really, this is where we begin to think about more unique aspects of the agency. So what you are looking at in terms of the compliance issues, both from an audit point of view and a quality point of view, really need to begin with a robust assessment. And I think it's very important to begin to think about risk across the agency for all the activities. And here's a very simple example of how you might go about looking at a risk assessment. And there are many examples of this online, but this is a sort of fairly simple, again, another matrix, but a very simple way of looking at the likelihood of something happening versus the severity of harm to the agency if it does happen. So it's unlikely that staff necessarily are going to be taking criminal action against criminal activities against clients, but the likelihood of it, the severity of that happening is very high. So you end up with something that is, it looks in this matrix to be a medium risk, whereas it's likely that you are going to face some recoupment for some Medicaid program at some point, and depending on the amount of money involved, the severity to the agency could be very high. So this matrix is designed to hold the results of looking at all activities and deciding whether they're at low, medium, high harm or likely to happen. And it gives you a sense of where audits and should be concentrated. And obviously in the high and medium categories is where most of the effort should be taken in terms of auditing and giving feedback to staff to take remedial action. Similarly, understanding for an agency what quality is in terms of programmatic individual work is important to set standards, and they need to be set obviously at an executive level, but understood for individual staff and program managers and supervisors to be able to implement. And those standards for quality, again, are what a good auditing team could look for. So this is not just looking for the audit and compliance and contractual obligations, but also what does the agency itself decide is good quality? Set those standards and go about auditing those standards against the work that's been carried out. And the data will allow the agency to understand where they are and what they need to do to begin to improve the quality of their service. So every agency provides services to individuals. But at an agency level, I think it's important to understand the impact on not just the individual, but cohorts or populations that you're serving. So it's having data that enables you to understand who the people are you're serving. I mean, I've given examples on the left-hand side of age, gender, where people live, diagnosis, if that's appropriate, ethnicity. And this list of data, it should be very specific to the services you're providing. But it really is the only way of understanding the impact of the agency if you understand who you're serving, and it links directly to the outcomes that we're going to be talking about in a second. The outcome, the population that you serve needs to be reflective of your mission and reflective of the community that you are providing the services to. Without understanding the demographic information, it'd be very difficult to describe what you're doing and how impactful you are to stakeholders. And it's important to understand as well whether the people you're serving are skewed away from what the mission demands, and also what the community in general looks like. So this information really begins to tell you a clear picture of who you're serving, what those outcomes are on the population you're serving, and whether there's any relationship or issues you need to be looking at in terms of who you're serving versus the community you're providing the services in. Client person served satisfaction feedback is important, but it's important to remember that this needs to be done in a way that allows for criticism. It's important to understand and take feedback that is very positive with a pinch of salt, because because I think a lot of research shows that people are report very positively about the services they provide, and this unfortunately is a lot to do with trust between the people who receive services and the agency itself. So important to have, very important to follow up on, and very important that feedback is taken, is look with suspicion in terms of how positive it may be, and look towards feedback that is critical. There are open lines of communication that people who receive services can anonymously give feedback. So you begin to get a much more realistic view of how people feel about services being provided. So lastly, outcomes. The outcomes that we need to be keeping data on really should be about how do we objectively know your agency is achieving its mission. So how do we show to our board, to ourselves, to outside stakeholders that the work that we do has an impact, specifically in terms of the outcomes of the services. And these are not process measures. No, we're not looking at how many people we served or how long in service or the census of a program. This is not really about that. This is about outcomes that show the effectiveness of the service, either on the individual or maybe on the community that you work in. And maybe a couple of ways of developing outcomes. For some programs, it may be the actual effect. So for a pre-employment program, an employment program, people getting jobs, keeping jobs, being employed at minimum wage, maybe a direct outcome of the work that the agency provides and is a clear outcome. For some agencies, it may be that the health promotion activities they're involved in can show a direct link from the work they're doing to improved health, either in diabetes or blood pressure. So there could be actual outcomes connected directly to the work that's being carried out. For some of us, those connections are not easy to prove. So it may be that looking for a proxy for those outcomes is a significant way of demonstrating the outcomes. So for psychiatric emergency use or hospitalization, a reduction in both of those could show the effectiveness of behavioral health treatments. It's not a direct correlation, but it's reasonable to assume that people using hospitals, using the emergency room, is a positive outcome of interventions and work and support being provided by a mental health, a substance abuse agency. And it's also worth looking at, what are the stakeholders interested in? What are their needs in terms of outcomes? So there's an example here of managed care companies are very interested in how the HEDIS measures they are held accountable to are improving. So these HEDIS measures are things like, again, ER use, follow-up from hospitalizations, H1C levels, use of psychotropic medication, and depression screening. There are a number of them, and managed care companies are measured by those measures. And if your outcomes can directly show that your services improve those measures, then that's going to be an important dialogue with a managed care company, for instance, around outcomes. So the next modules that we're going to be looking at are to do with, oops, I've gone one too far. We're going to be looking at, in the next module, how data can be used by program management. The matrix after the module afterwards is about supervision specifically, and the last one is about how staff need and use data themselves. So I hope you'll be able to join us for those, and we'll go through in some detail the data and the use of data in those fields. And back to you, Ashley.
Great. So thank you so much, Chris. That was great. And I hope everyone found it enjoyable and helpful. Like always, if you have any questions or feedback, you can please send them to the email address listed on the screen, mctac.info@nyu.edu, and we will respond to you as soon as we can. Thank you again for joining us, and we will talk to you later. Bye.